Well, hello, and thank you for joining me for another IT Wire interview. Today, I'm talking to Greg Barnett. He is the GM of the Digital Experience Practice at AccessHQ. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Alex. G'day.
So I thought I'd start at the beginning. You're going to be a speaker at a webinar on October 15, a free webinar on at 1 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time, now that we've got daylight saving, on the topic of digital accessibility. And we're going to do that via Zoom. But before we delve into more detail, can you please tell us a little bit about AccessHQ, what it does and when it started?
Yeah, sure. Look, we began our journey in 1995. That was a little ways before my time, but that's when we started. Funny enough, out of what was then at the time Paul Keating's Creative Nation program. The HQ in AccessHQ is short for Human Plus Quality. And look, for us, it's fundamentally about two things that we do. We do software testing really well, having done that for many, many years. That's our pedigree, as it were. That's where we've got our start, I guess. But seeing, many, many changes in the industry over the years. The other thing we do well is we help organisations reimagine their approach to technology quality in what we, and I suppose others broadly call the digital age. And, things need to be done a little bit differently now than they used to be.
So where does your digital experience team sit within AccessHQ?
Yeah, good question. So my digital experience team focuses on the end user, or as we prefer, the customer experience within the technology quality space. And in some regards, this kind of bookends what we do in the testing space. We do a whole lot of the upfront research, the upfront design work, with end users for any given system, piece of software, website, app, what have you. And then once that work's been done, we work all the way through the software development lifecycle aimed at ensuring that CX is carried all the way through the end, and that this, the actual promise that whatever system has actually comes to life when it gets released out to market.
So what's the short version of your journey in the world of tech that led you to the current GM position?
The short version doesn't include my stint in hospitality as an apprentice chef. I got my start as a developer, cutting code, HTML for IBM back many years ago, when that was all very much the whole boom of e-business and or what have you. And the developing for front-end web is really what led me into the world of user experience, or again, as we prefer to call it, customer experience. And really that customer experience realm was more all the way up to what I'm doing today with my team, where myself and the team, we love getting in there, getting our hands dirty and working on what would make a customer experience better.
Sure. And so what is the situation with digital accessibility in Australia? Our businesses, the governments, universities, other organizations in 2020, are they up to par, or is there still a long way to go?
There's still a long way to go. It's certainly got a lot better than it was. Government is a little bit of a leader in many ways, or certainly the bigger government players, the federal government players. They put a strong message out there for very, very sound accessibility. Smaller agencies are still a little bit behind, as tends to be some of the local government players. They need some work. The commercial side is a real mix. There's a lot of large consumer-driven organisations who are doing very, very good things from an accessibility standpoint. The airlines are doing quite a lot. Interesting space, because the airlines are governed both by laws, obviously, within Australia, but our airlines are also governed by some very strict laws in regards to flying into the USA. When we were flying into the USA, of course. So that's been a very strong push for them. But there's still a lot of work to be done. Accessibility still tends to be an afterthought, something we slap on at the end, do an audit for, and then scramble to see if we can fix some things in a later release.
Sure. Well, it's a little bit like security. That used to be bolted on. Now it has to be a fundamental part of design. And you would think that accessibility, especially for disabled people needing, screen readers and larger font size, all that sort of thing. I remember that was a big thing during the Sydney Olympics, when somebody famously said, well, hey, the Sydney Olympic side doesn't abide by the accessibility rules. So, do you just I thought of this question now, but do you have people with other abilities as part of your team to help with that part of the accessibility equation?
Funny enough, we do, and they come and go. I have had vision impaired people, physically impaired people, colourblind people in the team, and that's a very important part of understanding what matters to these people. One of the guys that was in my team previously, unfortunately he's left, he was about 90% vision impaired.
Mm-hmm.
But he was also a coder, which made for a really fascinating combination. He was quite a hardcore developer, but he had that vision impairment. So we have people in the team, but we also work very closely with people, normal people out there in the world that actually have disabilities, to understand what matters most to them, what are some of their biggest frustrations, what tools work better than others. All of that stuff, we try and keep a real finger on the pulse in that regards.
And as part of the whole software testing, which is, I guess, separate too, but also part of the accessibility side of things as well, you must have a team that then helps companies to test and to test the things you do and that are part of the service you provide.
That's exactly right. So we run a testing service. It's probably the core thing we do. When someone's in the process of building something, and we test as it's being built, that's a much better way to do it. Unfortunately, we do quite often end up testing when something's already out there and it's a bit of a band-aid solution. But I'd certainly rather see someone do that testing than not do any testing at all. The other thing we've found a growth in is we're doing a lot of training, because one of the gaps in the industry at large is in the development knowledge. Developers are very, very good at what they're doing. I'm an ex-developer myself, so I understand this, but the accessibility side of things isn't, it's not always the sexiest side of development. So we spend a lot of time working with dev teams to bring them up to speed on what are the best techniques for coding for accessibility.
And just sort of off the top of my head again, as we're talking, how often will a company that perhaps hasn't really taken accessibility into account at the beginning then decided maybe in a version 2 or version 3 to sort of rewrite it with those principles at the heart and then introduce a new version that really wows in from that point of view?
Probably about 50-50, I would say. As much as I'd like to say it happens all the time, it doesn't always happen, and it can still end up being an afterthought even when the new one is put out there. Or, we've got to the pointy end of the project and we've run out of time. Gee, what can we cut to get this launched? Well, let's do that later. Unfortunately, a fair bit of that still happens in the software development world, particularly on the enterprise software side of things.
Sure. But look, at least, I mean, it is happening, and presumably it's just a matter of time before it's just like with security, you would expect it to be a first order thing that is absolutely part of the design, and no doubt you're helping to make that a reality.
Yep, it's getting better all the time.
So look, we've got the Digital Accessibility Conference. Can you tell us, I mean, you're the host of that particular conference, goes for half an hour. What can you tell us that you'll be covering at the conference? And, who are you expecting to attend? Who should attend? And as we said before, it's free, right?
It's definitely free. Yeah. Who should attend? I mean, anyone who's working on digital projects to some extent should attend. But this has a real business focus. We're trying to keep it very short and snappy, so we don't want to include too much content, so people can fit it in within their schedules. So we've tailored it for a business audience, and for want of a better word, I suppose, a business stakeholder within a software development project. Maybe they're a product manager, a business sponsor, something like that is probably the real target, because we're giving them some very good background and knowledge in why it's important and what they should do about it. But we're giving some very useful information in how they can drive their case internally if they need to get funding for this sort of work. And we're also giving some good tips on just how to get the most out of their ICT teams within their own organizations, or potentially a vendor if they're going to market.
Sure. And just for people, in case they're wondering, it's a half an hour session. So definitely you're keeping it short and sweet without taking the whole day, which is good in this era of endless Zoom meetings.
Indeed.
So what's the web address that people can go to register for this conference?
Web address. Okay. www.dialog-cloud.com.au.
Yep.
/dialog-thought-leader-series.
Sure. Well, I'm going to have that link in the article that this video will go with, and I'll have it in the description as well. So, and you can always rewind and listen to that again. Because
yes, it's not the shortest.
Well, next time maybe we can get a URL shortener or something. But anyway, that's all good. So your parent company Dialog is also hosting a range of other thought leader presentations from senior executives. So are there any more this year, and presumably what more due in 2021 as well.
Yeah, the other one due this year is on data governance, and that's by Dr. John Gray, who heads up Catapult BI, one of our other subsidiaries. That's slated for this year. The others are a whole bunch of very, very interesting topics in the works, but we haven't quite decided what will be the final topics as yet.
Sure. And what's the short version of what the other Dialog companies do?
Yeah, so Dialog itself is a full IT service consultancy, developing managed applications, what have you. AccessHQ is the quality arm of that. The other two organisations that fit within the Dialog umbrella, one is ICE Media, who is our digital agency, building web-based solutions, broadly speaking. And then Catapult BI is the other one I just mentioned, to specialise in business analytics, business insights, corporate performance management, that side of things.
So look, I always like to finish interviews off with 3 questions. The first one is about the future. How do you see digital accessibility and software testing, the things you do, evolving over the next decade? What might it look like in 2030?
In 2030, yeah. I mean, the tools are getting better all the time, as is the coding. I think that the next big step that really needs to happen in the accessibility space is probably around test automation. It's been as much as test automation is used a lot in the functional testing space, test automation has been a very difficult thing to crack within the accessibility space due to a whole lot of things to do with programmable detecting. I won't get into that. I'd like to think by 2030 we're able to crack that, and that it means we're able to address accessibility issues much, much quicker.
Sure. And my second last question is always just simply to ask, what's the best piece of advice that you've ever received to help you get where you are today?
Yes, always a good question. It makes one ponder many, many different answers to that. I suppose our CEO, Tony Bailey, probably taught me this, and it's really to trust your own instinct. Put it a better way, he taught me that if you go and ask 10 people for feedback, you'll get 10 people's feedback. But just because you're being given feedback doesn't necessarily mean you should act on that feedback. And just, sometimes to trust your own instinct a little bit.
Yeah, go with your gut.
Go with your gut.
Yeah. So what is your final message to the viewers and to the readers, to your customers, partners, the industry, and those who are going to attend the webinar?
Yep, I get in early. Don't wait till 2 weeks before launch. Get your developers up to speed. Start planning your designs. Have a look at your early designs and give some thought to how you're going to make them accessible up front. Build it into the beginning so you're not firefighting at the end. That's the best advice I can give.
Well, that's really good. Greg Barnett, GM of the Digital Experience Practice at AccessHQ. Thank you very much for your time and best of luck with the webinar.
Thanks very much, Alex. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.